The rain poured relentlessly that evening in Portland, turning the streets into mirrors of light. Min-jae Kim stood across from the Grand Rose Hotel, his soaked jacket clinging to his shoulders as he watched the golden glow from the ballroom windows. Inside, music and laughter filled the air. Outside, his heart shattered with every passing second. He had promised himself he wouldn't come, that he would let her have this perfect moment. But his feet had carried him here anyway, pulled by a force stronger than his willpower. Through the rain-streaked glass, Min-jae could see her. Soo-jin Lee, the woman who had consumed his thoughts for 3 years, stood in the center of the ballroom wearing a dress that looked like captured starlight. Her dark hair was elegantly styled, and even from this distance, he could see pure joy on her face. Beside her stood Ji-hoon Park, her husband now, gazing at her with devotion that made Min-jae's chest ache. This was the wedding he couldn't stop, the happiness he couldn't destroy, no matter how much the truth burned inside him. Min-jae carried a secret that could tear apart everything Soo-jin believed about her life. 3 years ago, he had been hired as a private investigator by a dying man named Sang-woo Lee, who claimed to be searching for his biological daughter given up for adoption 30 years earlier. The investigation had led Min-jae to Soo-jin, and somewhere along the way, he had fallen desperately in love with the woman he was supposed to help reunite with her father. But before he could tell her the truth, Sang-woo had died suddenly, taking his request to the grave. Min-jae had convinced himself that silence was mercy. What good would it do to disrupt her life with news about a father she would never meet? So he had watched quietly as she fell deeper in love with Ji-hoon, as they got engaged, as this wedding day arrived. He had carried his secret like a stone, growing heavier each day. Lightning split the sky, and Min-jae's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized, one that belonged to a dead man. Sang-woo Lee. Min-jae's hands trembled as he answered. Min-jae Kim? We need to talk about my daughter, the voice said. And about the lie I told you 3 years ago. Min-jae's heart pounded as he pressed the phone against his ear, unable to believe what he was hearing. Sang-woo Lee was supposed to be dead. He had attended the funeral 3 years ago, had watched the casket being lowered into the ground at Willamette National Cemetery. Yet here was his voice, clear and very much alive, speaking words that made Min-jae's world tilt on its axis. You're dead, Min-jae whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. I was at your funeral. A dry laugh came through the phone. That funeral was for someone else, Mr. Kim. I needed to disappear, and you helped me do exactly that by stopping your investigation. The truth hit Min-jae like a physical blow. He had been manipulated, used as a pawn in whatever game Sang-woo had been playing. Why? Min-jae demanded, anger rising in his throat. Why fake your death? Why lie about everything? There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of rain and distant thunder. Because I wasn't dying, and Soo-jin isn't my daughter, Sang-woo finally said. But she is connected to something much bigger, something dangerous that I was investigating. I'm a federal agent, Min-jae, and that girl in there is at the center of a case that could bring down one of the largest crime syndicates on the West Coast. Min-jae felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Nothing he had believed for 3 years was true. Soo-jin wasn't Sang-woo's biological daughter. The dying man's final wish had been an elaborate lie. But why? What could Soo-jin possibly have to do with organized crime? She was a nurse, a kind woman who spent her days helping people. You're lying, Min-jae said, though doubt crept into his voice. Soo-jin has nothing to do with criminals. You're wrong. Sang-woo's voice turned grave. Her adoptive father, Dong-hyun Lee, isn't who she thinks he is. And the man she just married, Ji-hoon Park? He's been using her to get close to information that could get them both killed. The ballroom doors opened suddenly, and Min-jae saw Soo-jin step outside with Ji-hoon, their faces glowing with newlywed happiness. They stood under the hotel awning, protected from the rain, sharing an intimate moment. Min-jae's breath caught as Ji-hoon pulled out his phone, his expression changing from loving husband to something cold and calculated. He spoke rapidly into the device, glancing around nervously, and Min-jae realized with growing horror that Sang-woo might be telling the truth. What do you want from me? Min-jae asked into the phone, his eyes never leaving the couple. Sang-woo's answer chilled him to the bone. I need you to get her out of that hotel tonight, before Jihoon realizes she knows something she shouldn't. Because right now, Min-jae, your Soo-jin is living her last hours as a free woman. Unless you save her first. Min-jae's mind raced as he watched Soo-jin and Jihoon through the rain. Everything Sang-woo had just told him seemed impossible, yet the way Jihoon's demeanor had shifted from loving groom to something darker made Min-jae's instincts scream warnings. He had spent years as an investigator, and he knew when someone was hiding something. Jihoon's body language, the quick nervous glances, the hushed urgent tone of his phone conversation, all pointed to a man with secrets. How do I know you're telling the truth? Min-jae asked Sang-woo, his voice tight with tension. You've lied to me before. Why should I believe anything you say now? Sang-woo's response was immediate and firm. Because in approximately 20 minutes, 3 black SUVs are going to pull up to that hotel. Men will come inside looking for Jihoon Park, and they won't care who gets hurt in the process. Soo-jin will be collateral damage unless you get her out now. Min-jae felt ice water in his veins. Who are these men? What do they want? The line crackled with static before Sang-woo answered. Jihoon stole something valuable from the wrong people. He thought marrying Soo-jin would give him cover, access to her father's connections. He's been using her this whole time, Min-jae. And tonight, his past catches up with him. Inside the hotel, Soo-jin laughed at something Jihoon said, completely unaware of the danger surrounding her. Min-jae watched as Jihoon kissed her forehead, then quickly walked back inside, leaving her alone under the awning. This was Min-jae's chance, perhaps his only chance, to reach her before everything fell apart. But how could he approach her now, after 3 years of silence? What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound insane? Congratulations on your wedding, but your husband is a criminal and you need to run? She would think he had lost his mind. I'm sending you a file, Sang-woo said, and Min-jae's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Open it. You'll see proof of everything I've told you. Bank transfers, surveillance photos, recorded conversations. Jihoon Park has been planning this for over a year. Min-jae opened the file with shaking hands, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Photos of Jihoon meeting with known criminals, documents showing money laundering through fake businesses, and worst of all, a recorded conversation where Jihoon explicitly discussed using his marriage to Soo-jin as a cover for his illegal activities. Soo-jin turned suddenly, looking out into the rain, and for one heart-stopping moment, her eyes met Min-jae's across the distance. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by confusion, then something that might have been joy. She took a step forward, her hand rising in a tentative wave, and Min-jae knew he had run out of time. He had to make a choice right now, walk away and let whatever was coming happen, or step into her life again and destroy the illusion of happiness she had built. Behind her, through the ballroom windows, Min-jae saw the front doors of the hotel burst open and 3 men in dark suits enter, their faces grim and purposeful. Min-jae didn't think. He ran. His feet pounded against the wet pavement as he crossed the street, dodging cars and ignoring the angry horns blaring around him. Soo-jin's eyes widened in surprise as he reached the hotel awning, breathless and soaking wet. Min-jae? What are you doing here? Her voice was a mixture of shock and confusion, her wedding bouquet still clutched in her hands. He grabbed her arm gently but firmly. Soo-jin, I know this sounds crazy, but you need to trust me right now. We have to leave immediately. She pulled back, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. Leave? Min-jae, it's my wedding night. What's going on? You disappeared 3 years ago without explanation, and now you show up here telling me to run? Before Min-jae could answer, the sound of shouting erupted from inside the ballroom. Through the glass doors, they could see chaos unfolding. The 3 men in dark suits were pushing through the crowd of wedding guests, their hands reaching inside their jackets. Screams filled the air as people scattered, knocking over chairs and tables in their panic. Jihoon appeared at the far end of the ballroom, his face pale with terror, running toward a back exit. The lead man shouted something in Korean, and suddenly one of them pulled out a gun. Soo-jin gasped, her bouquet falling to the ground as her hands flew to her mouth. Oh my god, what's happening? Jihoon! She tried to run back inside, but Min-jae held her firmly, pulling her away from the doors. Those men aren't here for the wedding, Sujin. They're here for your husband. Jihoon is involved in something dangerous, and if you go back in there, you'll get caught in the crossfire. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain that had started to blow under the awning. You're lying. Jihoon would never, he's a financial consultant. He's a good man. Her voice cracked with desperation, her entire world crumbling in real time. Min-jae's phone buzzed with a text from Sang-woo, get her to the parking garage. Blue sedan, level 2. Keys under the mat. Go now. More gunshots rang out from inside, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Wedding guests poured out of every exit, running in all directions, their formal clothes becoming soaked in the rain. Min-jae saw Jihoon burst through a side door, blood staining his white shirt, pursued by 2 of the armed men. Sujin screamed her husband's name, but Jihoon didn't even look in her direction. He just kept running, disappearing into the darkness of the parking lot. He left you, Min-jae said quietly, the words harsh but necessary. He didn't even try to protect you, Sujin. Whatever he's involved in, he values his own life more than yours. Sujin collapsed against him, her wedding dress dragging in the puddles, her body shaking with sobs. In the distance, police sirens wailed, growing closer. Min-jae knew they had maybe 2 minutes before this entire area became a crime scene. He looked down at the woman he had loved from afar for 3 years, now broken and betrayed on what should have been the happiest night of her life, and made a decision that would bind them together forever. Min-jae half-carried, half-dragged Sujin through the chaos toward the parking garage. Her white wedding dress was now stained with mud and rain, the delicate fabric tearing as they moved. She kept looking back toward the hotel, searching for Jihoon among the fleeing guests and arriving police cars. We can't just leave him, she sobbed, her voice breaking with each word. He's my husband. He needs help. Min-jae's jaw clenched as he guided her up the concrete stairs to level 2. The man you married isn't who you think he is, Sujin. I have proof. But right now, we need to survive the night before I can show you anything. They found the blue sedan exactly where Sang-woo had said it would be. Min-jae fumbled under the floor mat, relief flooding through him when his fingers closed around the keys. He unlocked the doors and helped Sujin into the passenger seat. She sat there trembling, mascara running down her face, staring at nothing. The woman who had been radiant with joy just 30 minutes ago now looked like a ghost, hollow and lost. Min-jae started the engine and pulled out of the parking space, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Behind them, more police cars arrived, their red and blue lights painting the walls of the garage. Where are we going? Sujin's voice was barely a whisper. Min-jae glanced at her, seeing the shock settling in. Somewhere safe. I have a friend who owes me a favor, a place outside the city where we can figure out what's really happening. She turned to him then, her eyes filled with anger and confusion. You knew something was wrong. That's why you came tonight, isn't it? You knew about Jihoon. The accusation in her voice cut through him like a blade. How long have you known? How long have you been keeping this from me? Min-jae's phone rang before he could answer. Sang-woo's voice came through the car speakers, calm and controlled. Good, you got out. Now listen carefully, both of you. Jihoon Park isn't just a criminal, he's an undercover operative who went rogue. The men chasing him work for the Jade Dragon Syndicate, and they believe he stole $15 million from them. They'll tear the city apart looking for him, and Sujin, they think you know where the money is hidden. Sujin's face went even paler. I don't know anything about any money. I don't understand any of this. Your father does, Sang-woo continued, and something in his tone made Min-jae's blood run cold. Dong-hyun Lee has been laundering money for the Jade Dragon Syndicate for 20 years. Jihoon married you to gain access to your father's network, to learn how the operation worked so he could steal from them and disappear. But something went wrong tonight. Someone betrayed him, and now everyone connected to this is in danger. Including you, Sujin. The car swerved slightly as Min-jae processed this information. Sujin's father, the kind man who had raised her with love and care, was a criminal. Everything in her life had been a lie. Sujin sat in stunned silence as they drove through the rain-slicked streets of Portland. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm, the only sound besides her ragged breathing. Min-jae kept checking the rearview mirror, watching for any sign they were being followed. Finally, Sujin spoke, her voice hollow and distant. "My father is a good man. He coaches Little League, he volunteers at the church, he cries at sad movies. You're wrong about him." But even as she said the words, doubt crept into her expression. Min-jae could see her mind working, replaying memories, searching for clues she had missed. "I need to call him," she said suddenly, reaching for her phone. Min-jae's hand shot out, stopping her. "You can't. If Sang-woo is right, your phone is probably being traced. The moment you turn it on, they'll know exactly where we are." Sujin stared at the phone in her hand as if it were a snake, then slowly set it down. "This can't be real. Yesterday I was planning my honeymoon. Today I'm running from criminals and being told my entire life is a lie. Who are you really, Min-jae? Why did you disappear 3 years ago, and why did you come back tonight?" Min-jae's throat tightened. This was the moment he had been dreading, the moment when he would have to explain everything. 3 years ago, I was hired to find someone. That investigation led me to you, and I fell in love with you. But the man who hired me, Sang-woo, lied about who he was and what he wanted. By the time I discovered the truth, you were engaged to Ji-hoon, and I thought staying away would protect you. I was wrong." Sujin turned to look at him fully for the first time since they got in the car. Rain streaked the windows, creating shadows across her face. "You loved me?" The question hung in the air between them. Before Min-jae could answer, headlights appeared behind them, moving fast. A black SUV, the same kind that had been at the hotel. "Hold on," Min-jae said, pressing the accelerator. The sedan lurched forward, engine roaring. Sujin gripped the door handle as they took a sharp turn. The SUV stayed right behind them, closing the distance. Through the rain, Min-jae could see 2 men in the front seats, their faces grim and determined. The chase through Portland streets felt like a nightmare. Min-jae pushed the sedan to its limits, taking turns that made the tires scream against the wet pavement. Sujin braced herself against the dashboard, her wedding dress bunched around her knees, her breath coming in short gasps. The black SUV stayed close, its powerful engine easily keeping pace. Min-jae's mind raced, trying to remember the layout of the city, searching for any advantage. "There's a construction zone ahead near the river," he said, his voice tight with concentration. "If I can lose them there, we might have a chance." They flew past shuttered storefronts and empty parking lots, the late hour meaning few witnesses to their desperate flight. The SUV suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside them. Sujin screamed as the passenger window of the SUV rolled down, revealing a man with a gun. Min-jae jerked the wheel hard right, cutting down a narrow alley between 2 warehouses. The sedan scraped against a dumpster, metal shrieking, but they made it through. The SUV was too wide, forced to brake and find another route. Min-jae didn't waste the precious seconds they had gained, pushing forward toward the waterfront. The construction zone appeared ahead, orange barriers and concrete pylons creating a maze of obstacles. Min-jae killed the headlights and navigated by memory and moonlight, weaving between the barriers. Behind them, the SUV's headlights swept across the construction site, searching. Min-jae pulled the sedan behind a stack of steel beams and cut the engine. They sat in darkness, both of them breathing hard, listening. The SUV's engine growled somewhere nearby, prowling like a predator searching for prey. Sujin's hand found Min-jae's in the darkness, squeezing tight. Her palm was ice cold. Minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, the sound of the SUV's engine faded into the distance. Min-jae let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We need to ditch this car," he whispered. "They'll be looking for it now. There's a safe house about 2 miles from here. We'll have to go on foot." Sujin nodded, still holding his hand. They climbed out of the sedan, and Min-jae finally got a good look at her in the dim light. Her wedding dress was ruined, her carefully styled hair falling in wet strands around her face. They walked through the dark streets like ghosts, staying in the shadows, avoiding the main roads. Sujin had kicked off her heels miles back, her bare feet making no sound on the wet pavement. Min-jae had given her his jacket, which looked absurd draped over her torn wedding dress, but at least it provided some warmth against the cold night air. Every car that passed made them freeze, pressing against walls or ducking behind parked vehicles. The safe house was an old apartment building in a forgotten part of the city, the kind of place people didn't ask questions. Min-jae led her up 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3C. The key was hidden above the doorframe, exactly where his former partner had promised it would be years ago. Inside, the apartment was sparse but clean, furnished with only the essentials. Sujin collapsed onto the worn couch, finally allowing herself to break down completely. Her sobs filled the small space, raw and painful. Min-jae knelt beside her, unsure whether to comfort her or give her space. She had lost everything tonight, her husband, her trust, her sense of reality. "Tell me everything," she said when her tears finally subsided. Her voice was hoarse but determined. "No more secrets, Min-jae. I deserve to know the truth about all of this." So he told her. About Sang-woo's original investigation, about falling in love with her during those coffee shop meetings, about the fake death and tonight's revelations. He showed her the files on his phone, the evidence of Ji-hoon's criminal activities, the photos of her father meeting with known syndicate members. With each piece of information, he watched something die in her eyes. "My whole life has been a performance," she whispered. "My father, my husband, even you. Everyone has been lying to me." Min-jae flinched at being lumped in with the others, but he couldn't deny the truth of her words. He had lied by omission, had kept secrets that might have saved her from this nightmare. Sujin stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. "What happens now? Do I just disappear? Change my name and pretend none of this existed?" Before Min-jae could answer, his phone buzzed. It was Sang-woo again. "Turn on the news," the agent's voice was urgent. Min-jae found the remote and switched on the small television in the corner. The local news was covering a breaking story, and what they saw made both of them freeze. Ji-hoon's face filled the screen, but the headline beneath it read, "Federal agent killed in shootout with organized crime members." The reporter's voice explained that Ji-hoon Park had been an undercover FBI agent working to bring down the Jade Dragon Syndicate when his cover was blown. Sujin's legs gave out, and she sank back onto the couch. He was FBI? He was one of the good guys? Her voice was barely audible. The news continued, showing footage of the hotel, interviews with traumatized wedding guests, and then a photo that made Min-jae's heart stop. Dong-hyun Lee, Sujin's father, being led away in handcuffs. The reporter explained that multiple arrests had been made tonight, including several high-ranking members of the money laundering operation. Sang-woo's voice came through the phone. "Ji-hoon's mission was to get close to your father, Sujin. He married you as part of his cover. But he fell in love with you for real, and that's what got him killed. He tried to protect you by keeping you ignorant of everything." Sujin began to shake, her entire body trembling with the weight of this revelation. The man she had married had used her, yes, but he had also loved her. He had died trying to protect her from a world she never knew existed. "There's more," Sang-woo continued. "Your mother, Misun, she knew nothing about your father's activities. She's being protected by federal agents right now. But Sujin, there's something else you need to know. Something about your adoption that changes everything." Min-jae felt ice in his veins. Whatever was coming next would be the final blow. "Your biological mother didn't abandon you," Sang-woo said gently. "She was murdered by the Jade Dragon Syndicate 28 years ago because she witnessed something she shouldn't have. Dong-hyun Lee was ordered to make you disappear, but instead, he adopted you and raised you as his own. In his twisted way, he was trying to protect you, to make up for the evil he had done. You were never supposed to survive that night, Sujin. But somehow, you did." The silence in the apartment was deafening after Sang-woo's revelation. Sujin sat motionless, staring at nothing, processing a truth that rewrote her entire existence. She wasn't just the daughter of a criminal, she was a living witness to a murder, a child who should have died but was saved by the very man who had been ordered to kill her. Min-jae moved to sit beside her, no longer keeping his distance. He took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. The next few weeks passed in a blur of federal investigations, witness protection discussions, and painful revelations. Mi-sun, Sujin's adoptive mother, was devastated to learn the truth about her husband but grateful he had shown mercy to at least one innocent life. Dong-hyun Lee accepted a plea deal, his testimony helping to dismantle the Jade Dragon Syndicate. In his confession, he admitted that adopting Sujin had been the only good thing he had ever done, that raising her had given him a glimpse of the man he could have been. Ji-hoon was honored posthumously for his service, his sacrifice recognized by the Bureau. Sujin attended a private ceremony, saying goodbye to a man she had loved but never truly known. Through it all, Min-jae stayed by her side. Not as an investigator or a guardian, but as someone who understood loss and betrayal, someone who had made his own mistakes but was trying to make things right. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild what had been broken 3 years ago. The foundation was stronger now, built on truth instead of secrets. One morning, 6 months after that terrible wedding night, Sujin woke up in a small apartment in Seattle, a new city for a new beginning. Min-jae was in the kitchen making coffee, and the simple domesticity of the moment made her smile. She walked to the window, looking out at Puget Sound, the water sparkling in the morning light. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother, asking about dinner plans. Real plans, honest plans, the kind that didn't hide terrible secrets. Sujin realized that while she had lost the life she thought she had gained something more valuable, the truth, and the freedom that came with it. She wasn't defined by the lies others had told or the crimes committed in her name. She was simply Sujin, a survivor who had chosen to keep living despite everything. Min-jae appeared beside her, handing her a cup of coffee. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She leaned against him, feeling safe in a way she never had before. "I'm thinking about second chances, and how sometimes the worst night of your life leads you exactly where you need to be." He kissed the top of her head, and together they watched the sun rise over the water, two broken people who had found healing in each other. The past would always be part of their story, but it no longer controlled their future.